Welcome, everyone, to episode 11, I'm pretty sure, of Live with Search Engine Land. I'm Ginny Marvin. I'm the editor-in-chief of Search Engine Land, and am thrilled to have Kirk Williams and Mike Ryan joining us today. And if there's ever sort of a sign of the times, we're well represented on our distributed workforce front. Kirk is in Billings, Montana. I'm in Portland, Maine, and Mike is in Linz, Austria, correct?
That's right.
That? Yeah. So thinkers or doers are everywhere. So I want to thank you both for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for being on the line with us. And as I mentioned in the chat, we will be taking questions throughout. So as you've got questions that come to mind, just pop those in there and we'll try to get to everyone's. And questions that we don't get to, we'll try to follow up online and on Search Engine Land as well. So with that, I'd love to have each of you quickly introduce yourselves, and we are going to be focusing on Google Shopping. There's so much to talk about with massive changes across the board. So before we dive in, Mike, why don't we start with you?
Sure. First, thanks for having me. Really great to be here with you guys. I would say tonight, but it's this afternoon in the US. So yeah, a word about myself. I've got a long background in retail, and more recently I relocated to Austria, moved here for love, in case anyone's wondering. And I'm working right now in product management for Smarter Ecommerce, and we provide different solutions for Google Ads. And what product management is all about is basically market observation, market analysis, user interviews, these type of topics. It's about making sure that we build the right products. So I think it's offers an interesting perspective on the market. And yeah.
Great, thanks. And Mike also writes and has great insights on all things shopping. So we're going to be talking a lot about what both Mike and Kirk write about. And so Kirk, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Kirk Williams with ZATO. We are, I like to describe us as kind of a small tactical implementation agency. So basically, we do Google Ads, and Microsoft Ads. That's it. We try to stay small, stay in our lane, so that we can keep our knowledge base really focused, and do a lot with e-commerce, specifically shopping ads. And kind of like Mike, I love to dig into shopping ads and figure it out and write on it and speak on it. And so yeah, looking really forward to the conversation today. I think there's a lot of stuff going on, obviously in e-commerce land, but also Google Shopping. So should be a lot of stuff we can play out here.
Yes, and the last time I got to see Kirk in person was, it feels like the other side of time in San Jose and at SMX West. And I know Mike just presented virtually at SMX London this week. So without further ado, let's dive in, because as we've said, there's lots to talk about. I do want to kind of take a big picture and just check in on how this has been going for you. How is your work, life, customers, clients? How's the past few months been?
Yeah, it's been a bumpy ride. It's been a wild ride. I mean, our company has like I think we're at 144 employees now, and we had people starting even remotely through the onboarding and so on. And so from an organizational perspective, it's been really interesting. And we saw that there was a bit of shock to ad spend early on, which was interesting for us to observe. And then basically for our clients, it's been all kinds of different things that we've seen. I mean, we've seen well, more on the shopping side, if we talk about the merchants, we've seen merchants where they were overwhelmed with order volume and their website broke and they had to stop advertising shopping. And we've seen other ones where they're really trying to pick up revenue that they've lost offline and replace that. So they're investing more heavily than ever in shopping. And we've seen merchants who, basically everything in between. We've unfortunately seen some merchants who have gone out of business. It's just been hugely volatile time for everyone. So
yeah,
been really interesting to watch and take part in that.
yeah. How about you, Kirk? And I know you've also been having your own personal literal upheavals.
I have issues. Yeah. No, yeah, that's for another story. We've had some significant home issues. So we basically had to move we had to move like as the pandemic hit. We moved the day before everything locked down here in Montana, and then we ended up just moving again here. So, nothing like throwing in life crisis in the midst of global crisis as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Overall, though, like in terms of business, I mean, we definitely, probably everyone on this call, especially like mid-March and things, especially at least in the US, mid-March is about when really the US basically started looking around saying, oh crap, right? And so we definitely saw that start to hit ad spend, consumer buying, things like that. We saw conversion rates basically tank in March for sure, March and then into April. And then the stimulus checks thing hit for the U.S. Primarily our clients are U.S. Based, so that's a lot where my head usually is. And we definitely saw April all of a sudden kind of shoot up to, like, in certain clients, up to Black Friday levels and beyond, right? So it's been a ride, as I'm sure others can see. So overall ZATO, I was looking into some numbers. Our client spend decreased, like overall across all of our clients, big average number, decreased probably about 25% year over year in April. That's basically now recovered for us in terms of, everyone's shifting to e-com. Like I said, stimulus checks did seem to stimulate things, at least in the US. So at least from what we saw. So we were encouraged by that. And yeah, as an agency, we were really unsure what was going to happen. We ended up only actually losing 2 clients directly related to COVID, and we've actually picked up some. And so somehow we actually came out on the other side with a slight growth in revenue, which is definitely not a complaint, because I know a lot of people are hurting. I think we are almost at 40 million in unemployment right now in the US. So overall, saw probably a lot of the dips in growth that others saw, and very thankful.
That's super interesting. We saw in the first week or so about a 25% drop too. But what's really interesting, I've got this data studio report online. You can look at what our Kpi benchmarking for Europe, and we saw in the first week the conversion rate jump up massively year over year. And then it's just been slowly deflating since then. And actually it's a little bit down year over year now. Different ways of interpreting it. But I think maybe when people were in that pantry loading mode, there was a lot of urgency that changed true. That they were, really a lot of purchasing intent driving that, which brought the conversion rates up. And then over time, that urgency is diminished, and maybe we're at a point, like you've mentioned, unemployment rates really punishing, and that could be why we're down year over year now at this point.
I mean, it's going to depend heavily on industry and vertical as well, right? As part of that, because you would see certain verticals kind of do the opposite in different things. We have clients in the event space as well as in the restaurant equipment space. Those have not been doing well, right? Just simply because that's what's been closed. Other things like home supply type things, as you said, absolutely have been looking great. So
yeah, and I've said this, I don't know how many times, but it's really been a story of the haves and have-nots, right? It's like it's boom and bust, and the boom, like there's challenges inherent in having the boom because you can't you've got supply chain, fulfillment chain challenges, inventory challenges, all of that, and staffing issues, which we've seen, just at Amazon, case in point, with having to staff up to what they hired, I think 175,000 fulfillment workers. So yeah, and it's then, for the bus, it's just been heartbreaking. So yeah, we do seem to be like we're kind of in a new sort of transition phase, it seems like now, where a lot of the sort of logistical challenges, supply chain challenges seem to be starting to even out. And people from a, stay-at-home lockdown to, depending on where you are, obviously, there's a shift seems to be happening now as people are trying to figure out how much to venture out, open up. So it seems like we're kind of now in like phase 2 of this. Who knows how many phases we're going to have, but maybe we're like even phase 2.5. I don't know, because certainly that period, March to early April, was, just the most volatile I think most of us have ever seen. April, you had the people riding high and riding low, and now it's kind of starting to, be this next phase, whatever that turns out to be. But a lot of those initial challenges, I think, are starting to sort of even out. All right. Well, I want to talk macro, big picture for e-commerce, but let's dive into some of the sort of nitty-gritty shopping topics. And there are 2 big ones on the table that we're going to dive into. First, we're going to talk about the big shift to open up Google Shopping to free listings. And so now, for at least in the US, and Mike, you can talk about other markets, what you're seeing, but here the free shopping listings are alive and well. There are really interesting things happening from a different category perspectives on what those listings look like on mobile in particular. So, if you look at my go-to query is always women's jeans. And when you search women's jeans on that shopping tab on mobile, the ad and the free listings, are just giant. I mean, they are enormous, full width views. The home category, they tend to serve in 2 columns, and then the rest tend to be single column, short, and depending on how many stores are listing that product, you can either go directly to the site or go to the Google listings page for stores. So the experiences are really quite different depending on the vertical that you're in. But first, I'd just love to hear kind of what your initial thoughts were when Google made this announcement now a couple weeks ago. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. It felt quite surprising. I mean, I knew about the services program. Generally, this idea to kind of what it sounds like to expand different product surfaces on the SERP and other Google properties and repurpose some of them. And it was kind of a twist. At least I didn't see it coming that they would repurpose the shopping tab like this. But then, I think I saw this assessment out there a lot regarding how this relates to their position with Amazon. All the pieces kind of started to fit together a little bit. But yeah, we have this channel in Slack called like Smack Intelligence, where we look out for emerging news stories and market signals and stuff like that. And that definitely raised a big red flag for us to have a look at that. At first we were like, we saw some of the there were some kind of misleading early statements out there and seeming to imply that all shopping clicks were free or something like that. And this was
I didn't see that.
this big what moment. And then after that, when we started to understand more, I mean, our assessment is that the click share of the shopping tab is pretty low compared to the SERP, the main SERP. But I guess there'll be more data or inferences coming out about that in the future, due to the ability now to kind of shed some light on that. But it was definitely a big shock moment.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because there've been sort of like minor steps towards integrating organic listings into the main SERP results, like with popular products.
Yep.
I guess it was about a year ago when they opened up the Merchant Center to organic feeds. And then you could see that like with the inventory search in knowledge panels. But you know, the actual surfacing of it, like the popular products panel that shows on some results, that is interesting because it can be powered either by the feed or by product schema. So they've got two data sources that are coming in that they're pulling from, not for shopping, but in these other ways that where schema starts surfacing rich snippets and popular products and things like that. And interesting to see the shopping surfaces across Google really be fully pushing the feed mechanism. So I don't know, Kirk, what were your initial thoughts? Everyone else, reminder quick to just go on mute, everyone. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Same thing. You know, we first saw it released. Google releases it and says, "Hey, it's now free to sell on Google." That was the title of their blog post. Whoa, okay, what does that mean, right? I think I want to say, I went back and looked at this, and I think it was TechCrunch. If it wasn't, I apologize, TechCrunch. But I'm pretty sure I remember first seeing the article that they said, and it said something, you know, that used in terms of Google Shopping is now free. If you go back, the title is not that anymore. So either I'm remembering wrong or they edited it, which is fair. So there was a lot of that, and so probably my initial thought was, okay, you know, what does this mean? What does this mean for shopping ad strategies, for bidding, you know, all that stuff, right? And then kind of the more we dug into it, the more we really understood, okay, this is actually what it means. Definitely a good overall move. Definitely not a huge impact in terms of what we're seeing in our page strategy. And we haven't really adjusted in any way, honestly, our strategy, our thought, other than adding in organic and kind of figuring it out and getting some analytics tracking on it and things like that. And so we've been seeing that. Otherwise, for the most part, we've not really adjusted anything and not really seen anything too major. Kind of on the average, we are seeing probably like a 3 to 4% ratio of paid to free clicks for our clients. Some really jump up, we've noticed, and I have not yet tracked that to, like I said, we're not very big, right? I've not yet tracked that to whether certain industries, verticals, you know, it'd be interesting to start really tracking something like you said, Ginny, apparel. Okay, so if you have these just ginormous mobile images, is that going to start weighting that more towards surface? I don't know. By the way, at least the search I just did, which is kind of funny, is if you search for your women's jean query on mobile, look at the shopping tab and then look at the image tab. They're basically the same thing at this point. So Google is definitely pushing hard to monetize images even more so than they have before. It's literally like it looks like the shopping tab. Wow. Paid listings on top, then all free. So I just checked one of our clients that we had thrown into the UTM params for checking in Google Analytics, and they're a smaller client. They tend to have a little bit higher AOVs just because they sell expensive products. Right now, past 7 days, Google Surfaces is our number 4 revenue traffic. So that was astounding, but that's also a very small data set. So all that to say that definitely invest in getting it in, getting things going in Google Merchant Center. A couple of things that I've learned that might be helpful for you is, let's see, a guy named Brody Clark out of Australia wrote about this, but Google has made structured data markup no longer work with their shopping tab. So if you want to appear on the shopping tab now for your services traffic, you actually do need to have a Google Merchant Center account.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on that markup. So that's probably an important thing to note there.
I was surprised to hear that that was even ever a thing, because it definitely was, because I saw Brody post that and I was like, didn't realize it was ever that the markup, the product schema was working for that.
So when Google first announced this, and really, I just did like a little webinar on this, so that's why it's all in my brain. So they first published on Google Webmaster Central blog, to my knowledge, the first we ever heard about free traffic surfaces across Google was last year, February 22nd, 2019, right? And when they did first publish it, they did note that it could be both Google Merchant Center or your website, your schema.
But did they say specific? Yeah, so I think some sources could, but I don't think the shopping tab itself.
Well, there were no products. Yeah, that's true. There were no products on the shopping tab at that time until a month ago. So maybe that was more of them just clarifying. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be closing up some loose ends, tying up some loose ends or something like that.
That's true. That's a good point. Maybe it was never allowed, but it was more like, hey, just to be clear for everyone, this is the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I talked to them about this, that was one of my big questions, was like, okay, you've been doing all this stuff with schema, with popular products, and is that also going to be kind of play a role here? And they were like, no.
Okay.
That said, I mean, not that you shouldn't do product schema too. There's other opportunities and ways that surfaces in Google and other platforms. But yeah, like to your point, I think you've got to have the feed. You've got to be optimizing your feed. So we have a question about tracking, Kirk, and I know you've got a blog post that I have referenced in this FAQ, which I'm about to share in the chat. But if you can just give a quick rundown of your tracking methodology, or how you start seeing your traffic from services across Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then I might let Mike weigh in on, he had shared something on one of my posts on LinkedIn about third-party tracking. I thought that was helpful. We don't tend to have many clients at all that are using third-party tracking, to be honest. And so it was helpful to get Mike's thoughts on that. This is kind of like the easy button, not to, maybe don't have too much of a complicated type tracking strategy, whatever. You're using Google Ads, Google Analytics, that kind of thing. We just, you shared that post, you can go in it, but we just utilize kind of a fairly easy setup with feed rules, where all you do is you go into feed rules in Google Merchant Center and append to your link just new UTM params. And we like to name ours Google and then /surfaces. So Google source and then surfaces as medium. My thought there and semi-argument is that it's not really CPC. I mean, it's not CPC, it's not paid, but also, to be honest, I don't know if it's really truly fairly organic, because there's a lot of it that's being fed by Google Merchant Center. There's stuff that you can tweak in Google Merchant Center that's not really, part of organic stuff. So at least for now, maybe an SEO around here is going to get really angry at me, and that's fair. At least for now, we're calling our Google /surfaces. And then that gives us insight into seeing, how much of that traffic. The one thing I'll note that's actually kind of important is you do in your Google Analytics settings need to make sure that you're not allowing your UTM parameters to override Google's auto tagging. Otherwise, then when they do click through, even on shopping ads, it'll come through as Google Services traffic, and you don't want to do that. So basically, you're using auto tagging for Google Ads, shopping ads to be, to be segmented correctly. And then if it comes through on the surfaces click, it's not through Google CPC, then your parameters will override it and it'll come through as Google services. So.
Yeah, and to just back up a little bit, so Google services across Google encompasses now the free listings on shopping, and that's the shopping tab, and it's also the shopping hub that's live in the US and France. That's google.com/shopping or shopping.google.com. You can access it either both ways. And then Google Images and some Google Search and Lens as well. Right. So so that's also another this issue of we've got this the blending of Google properties and losing the ability to track individual channels and properties. And so this is another case of that where you've got this amalgamation of traffic sources, and there's no way, even with the traffic, Kirk's great example, but it's something, but it's not as detailed as some of us would like. But Mike, did you want to talk about tracking as well?
Yeah, just a word about it. And I think what you just mentioned is so interesting, because even still, we can't get to the bottom of what is the click share in the shopping tab, for example, because it's muddled up with all the other surfaces. And I don't know, though. I feel a little validated, though, Kirk. Thanks for sharing the 3 to 4% number, because I've seen people saying 10 to 15%, and maybe it can happen, but it seems a little unrealistically high to me. And I didn't think Google would make a decision like this if it were that high. But yeah, one possibility I was talking about with my colleague, Reinhard, we were talking about another method of this, which you could just duplicate your feed, and then you can serve it once to the surfaces with a distinct UTM parameter, and then serve it once to everything else with a different UTM parameter. And this is potentially more compatible with third-party tracking. It's maybe somehow a little clumsy where you have to duplicate your duplicate your feed. You might not want to do that, but it's an alternate approach. And I think there's a few blog articles out there at this point with some different options, because the analytics community, these kind of tracking guys, are starting to weigh in as well.
Yeah. So I had thought, because when you upload a new feed in Merchant Center, there is the option, like, so both the Google services across Google and ads are checked by default. And I was like, oh, well, why don't you just upload 2 different, duplicate feeds and have one feed to surfaces and one feed to ads? And somebody was like, you're going to override the product IDs. So what I've learned is that, so that Google does say, don't do it, because it's not necessarily even the offer IDs or the product IDs, it's that the offers will migrate the term. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how this is working, but that essentially you get disabled for ads is the short of it. Because that did seem like, well, it also looks like they're trying to tell you to do that, the way that interface is set up. But that's what I've been told, is that you'll get disabled.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I haven't had the chance to play around with it too much because we don't have that many US clients. So yeah, definitely can be worth. It's a bit hackish, so maybe not the best way to do it. I'd have to check it out. I haven't heard about that, but better safe than sorry.
Yeah, I would love to have somebody test it on an account. Like, I don't really have an account I could test that on when not getting trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a little curious to know that as well, because they are literally different targeted destinations, and so I'm not sure why that wouldn't work, because you do the same thing, right, with like different targeted countries or that. It's literally the same product, just a different target destination for country. And then
Yes.
those attributes, you can click that in the feed, but also within that feed itself, attributes, you can submit included or excluded destination. That's the attribute.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The phrasing that I was given is very hard to parse. So I've resent the questions and I'm waiting for some clarification. So if I get that, I'll be adding to that FAQ certainly and let everyone know. But yeah, I cannot figure out exactly what the conflict is there, but if someone wants to test it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, interesting. One thing I'll note to a point you made, Mike, about the number of the 3 to 4% that we're seeing. We have seen in the 15%. 3 to 4 is to me like normal. And one client we saw 50%. But there's a reason that we figured out, and it probably is actually a good tip. In this specific client, they just want to advertise on shopping ads currently a specific part of their catalog. So like, let's just make one product type. Let's say it's apparel. They just want to advertise the women's jeans, not the shoes, right? So we had their entire catalog going into Merchant Center, but we were just filtering out in Google Ads, using the campaign settings filter, just advertise the women's jeans, let's say. Not that category, but you get it.
Yeah.
What we realized then, of course, which makes sense, is hey, services across Google is still showing free listings for their entire catalog, even though they at this moment only wanted us to invest money in a specific category. And so we very clearly were seeing benefit just from having their catalog added into Merchant Center, even though our intention wasn't. So that probably is a good illustration of the fact that like maybe someone is interested in this and maybe they're not even ready totally initially to invest in Google Ads yet and pay, or they just want to advertise part of it now. And this actually changes from what we'd said in the past, which was in the past, I would just suggest, hey, just upload the products you actually want to advertise. It's easier to manage, easier to stay up on disapprovals and stuff. Now I would say, I would reverse that and say, hey, I would upload and manage like your entire catalog, because you could get free clicks.
Right. Yeah. Don't worry about seasons. Don't worry about any of that. Like it's either going to get searched or it's not. It's going to get clicked or it's not. And it's sort of data for you. But yeah, that's interesting.
Quick question, Kirk. Have you seen if the click volume is developing, if it's growing at all, or does it seem kind of stable?
That is a really good question. What I've seen is obviously it spiked in the beginning, and now we've seen it remain fairly stable in our accounts. And especially, like I said, like the vast majority of our accounts seem to be in that 3 to 4% range. And now it seems to be stabilizing out, at least that we've been tracking. So,
yeah, that I've seen similar and similar ranges from a percentage standpoint. And it was really fun to see those spikes, but then you're like, oh, it's like, it's spiked to 30, whatever.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, that access. But I will say, like, there are some that the traffic is really not negligible, and Kirk, that you're already seeing revenue coming from it. Yeah, it's really interesting. All right, we do have a couple of questions that are coming through. Kirk, there's one that's sort of about questions about tracking and adding UTMs to the feed rule. With the GCLID. So just a question about, like, are you going to have attribution tracking issues, or will the GCLID just overwrite the UTMs?
So my understanding is that it is based on auto tagging, right? Is that if you have it set to auto tagging, then the GCLID does successfully override and make sure that everything is set where your ads clicks are coming through as ads. And I think that's where that setting, though, in Google Analytics that I tried to call it out a couple times there in the post, because you do want to make sure that that's set to not allow manual override. Because if your UTM tags are allowed to manually override your gclid, then it's going to all get messed up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you've shown it work. So yes, thank you. Kelly says thank you, Kirk.
I think it's working. I mean, we're getting data.
Yeah,
like you said, we need some like,
you're not losing ads data.
Yeah, I mean, we need
Right.
some like super duper analytics experts and tracking people to really dig into this. And who knows? Maybe they'll figure some little things to do around this. But this has worked so far, from what I can tell.
Yeah, that's great. All right. I want to switch to smart shopping campaigns, and this obviously is sort of part of a bigger evolution of automation in all things, but particularly Google campaigns and Google Shopping. Smart shopping campaigns is sort of the shopping version of what Google is doing in every other area of paid ads. And that is automation, automation from a bidding standpoint, and the way that it's targeting all of that stuff, and targeting across its properties with very little reporting, insights, loss of data, all of those sort of things that PPC people have been trained, brought up to live and die by. And so it's a massive, massive change for anyone who's been used to traditional shopping. And it's certainly aimed at sort of ease of use, taking advantage of machine learning, deep learning, and making things easier, increasing impression share across modalities. But again, obviously it comes with trade-offs. So that's where I'd love to dive in. I know you both have lots of experience and two thoughts on smart shopping campaigns. So why don't we start with you, Mike? And I know you were talking about this at London or SMX London this week as well. So kind of a quick, your take on pros and cons in a nutshell,
Sure, definitely. I mean, smart shopping, it's a whole new campaign type, and it represents in a lot of ways a pivot for Google. It's more than just some kind of a feature update or feature release. It's a significant change in course for them. And as actually, I think Kirk reported that he saw at a shopping expert series that they even have their own separate development team on here, for example, and that really indicates that the seriousness of that. And yeah, similar to what we're seeing with the free shopping clicks, they kind of connect in a certain way, which is that it looks like their product strategy here is to drive adoption for shopping, perhaps pick up late adopters, small and medium businesses where maybe shopping is too complicated. They've made a product that is definitely super easy to use, but it's not exactly comparable to standard shopping because it's serving different formats. It's or different placement possibilities, and those are the kind of the advantages. You can get some kind of full funnel coverage with a single campaign, which is very attractive, and you get these really kind of unique features like the dynamic prospecting, for example. But then on the other side, you've lost nearly all of your promotional controls. The default structure would be a single campaign, single ad group, which is not very segmented at all. And then the goal setting possibilities are expanding, but are pretty limited. So yeah, it's definitely a controversial campaign type. I mean, I think that it shows a lot of promise for those users I mentioned, some of these folks where they can't invest in shopping or it's too complicated. Shopping is a beast. But for people who have the know-how level and have a serious approach in place, I think that definitely in the medium and long term, it's pretty, it comes with some risk in activating it. I think that it performs well. In most cases, it seems to deliver on its promises. But I just see over time as the adoption rises that due to the lack of sophistication there, I think we're just going to run into problems where the question is, all right, I've hit a ceiling, what can I do now? Or actually traffic has fallen off, why, what can I do? And there are none of these intervention possibilities, none of these reporting possibilities that you would want to have in a situation like that. So it's kind of, it's a totally fascinating product from them, but has some drawbacks as well.
Yeah. I've put in the chat links to, Kirk's been writing a lot about smart shopping campaigns. I think there's links to the 6th in your series, Kirk, but you can all backtrack. And Mike had a great post on LinkedIn about his thoughts, and it is a deep dive, but both of these resources are worthy of your time. So grab those before you go. And Kirk, you know, I've heard you speak on smart shopping campaigns a lot. I've read a lot of what you've written, and I do want you to talk about your coffees and donuts concept, and you know, give us your perspectives on smart shopping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would echo pretty much everything Mike has said. You know, it's interesting. Smart shopping is interesting to me. I see it really as, aside from app campaigns, mobile app campaigns, really kind of Google's foray into pushing how far can we push this? How far can we push automation, right? So in some ways, you know, Mike says, well, right, which I agree. Hey, what happens when things go wrong? And, you know, it takes away controls for us to be able to edit and that. And that's where a Google engineer would look at us and say, exactly, like that's exactly why it's made and how it's made, so that you can't tweak it, so that the machine can do all that. So it's kind of the ultimate trust machine interface that we have in Google Ads. And of course, kind of ideologically, as I've written, and if you want the full spiel, you can go read all that stuff. You know, to me, like, it's more complicated than that. It's not that we do or don't trust the machine necessarily. It's that, hey, as we're trying to figure out smart marketing and full funnel ways and play with different channels and all this stuff, there are limitations to what a machine, the data points that it can get with directly tracked stuff. And so one of the things that I've had numerous conversations, arguments with Googlers on this is even the difference for us in how we advertise with shopping for retailers and brands. A retailer is gonna probably be a little bit more in the line of like a smart shopping type of a, here are my tracked ROAS goals, here are the revenue goals, blah, 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 input that in the machine. A brand is looking a lot more at bigger type, non-directly tracked stuff that goes into the machine. And so that's one of the reasons why, as we have experimented with both, we've often found with brands that we still need to maintain a very strong standard shopping strategy, because we're trying to do things with different parts of the user funnel with shopping ads that just does not translate into smart shopping. That's just one example. So, you know, one of the big things for me with smart shopping, and hey, if there's Googlers on here, awesome, you know, please hear this, is pretty much what you'll hear. A lot of this is, yeah, some of it is control, but there's also major data issues that we can't see, search terms, things like that. And so I actually think, like, hey, could there be a true ceasefire option where we meet somewhere in the middle, where if smart shopping all of a sudden had basically all of the data points, audiences, search terms, all that you could see with standard shopping, then that actually is taking a lot of the concerns from us advertisers away.
Right.
And so,
well, it goes to understanding inputs, right? There's so many, the search queries, yes, they're they're the inputs that are triggering your ads, but that's the data that then we as marketers feed back into our campaigns to say, yes, this is great from a business perspective. No, this is not great from a business perspective. And it's those, so there's the query data, there's the audience data, and then there's the business data that is not, that Google can't see. And so it's on us to be able to kind of feed that back into our campaigns. But if you can't see how, if you can get those inputs in, one, challenge. Two, if you can't see how those inputs are then actually performing, there's no way, the feedback loop is missing this big piece of the puzzle, right? And so I just mixed metaphors there, but I think that's really kind of what this all boils down to, is that, yes, okay, from a basic standpoint, we can all understand the benefits of machine learning and model training and all of that. But what you're both saying is, yes, but there are inputs that are missing that we are not able to inform that system on, that we know about our business. And so when Google says, and by the way, it's not just Google, it's Facebook, it's all of these algorithms, this is how this is working now, are operating on a ROAS basis when they don't understand, kind of what are all the, and you see Google kind of working on this with cost of goods sold, being able to go in, and there are some layering that's happening. But it seems to me like that's the really big disconnect between the marketer and the platform, the algorithms. And so I wonder where you see that kind of going, and if you do see us being able to get to a happy medium with these guys, or it's going to go their way.
Yeah, I mean, just a word about, like, if they would be supplying more data and more reporting options, the challenge is that it would agitate users, because it would raise questions in their mind. They'd want to touch things, they'd want to fix things or change things, and I don't think it's likely that they're going to start surfacing more stuff because of that. In fact, at Shopping Expert Series in Vienna here, we heard a Googler pretty directly say that, exactly that.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that this tension between Google's first-party data and then the merchant's first-party data, this is huge, because, like, search queries, for example, that was at least a data source that people are used to having, and it was one of the only, there's a lot of different audience and user signals that Google has access to, and they don't share many or any of those at all. And search queries were at least one thing, and now it's kind of off the table again. But I definitely agree. There's a need to integrate more business data into shopping, an urgent need, because ROAS is, it's just, I was describing this at SMX, it's just like an efficiency metric. It's like miles per gallon or something like that, but it gets used as a steering wheel. And this is really dangerous because it's not intended that way. ROAS, or I'll mix metaphors now. ROAS is like a kite, and you don't know how long the string is, or if it's even connected to anything, because it has really nothing to do with profit. This is like some kind of a false comparison when people think, oh, I have good ROAS, my campaigns must be profitable. It's a big assumption, and there's a huge difference. So yeah, when you talk about like the COGS data that can be integrated, this is definitely possible now, and it can be that Google in the future could, for example, try to deliver something like a margin-based bidding with a data source like that. But they would probably be able to, but I don't think that most people want to share their COGS data with Google. In fact, I know from user interviews that no one I've spoken to is interested in that at all. I mean, the thing is, though, that people will share their COGS data with Google, and over time, if Google knows what industry you're in, how your assortment looks like, or what products are in there, your geography and so on, and they have enough data points of people who have shared their COGS, then they might be able to infer yours anyway. So we'll see what happens down the line. But
yeah, I think that's a really good point, the inference. And but it kind of goes to one of the weaknesses, right? Of when you're getting inferred based on massive pools of data, then it's again sort of like where the nuances start to get lost in the way that your actual bids get treated. But I do have a question I want to get to. So Ankit asked, manual CPC or maximize clicks when starting a shopping campaign. So I would love to just to have that be a launching pad for how you're thinking about bidding. One, from a, if you are running smart shopping campaigns, how are you thinking about those targets? And when you're running manual traditional shopping campaigns and just getting started, what kind of bidding strategies are you starting with? Kirk, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, and a little of this goes into what you referenced before, the coffee and donuts type thing. That's just an analogy I've used in speaking, that I really like coffee, but I also like having a sweet something with my coffee. So it's both, right? So I like using both standard and smart, but we use smart as like the sweet pastry that comes alongside and enhances the standard, the coffee. And that would basically look like, hey, choosing some of your products to utilize in a smart shopping campaign. Especially what we found is things like top products. You can find your top reviewed products, all of those with 4.8 stars or more, that have at least 200 products, whatever. Throw a custom label on that, target a smart shopping campaign just for those. You can do, you can just try different creative things like that, so that you really are saying, hey, Google, you are finding people randomly all over the place. We do often, like others, see smart shopping do fairly well with ROAS and return on that. So it's definitely not something that we just never use. We just try to think through how to do it in a way where we have kind of these standard things still going on, and we also have smart shopping coming in and assisting. And especially, like I said, in brands where we want to make sure we own certain parts of the funnel with terms, with those more advanced strategies, with the standard campaigns, brand terms and things like that. So those are kind of our main cornerstone that we're running. When we go in, to answer the question, when we go in and first start campaigns or first start an account, I always start with CPC, manual CPC. I try to just get things going at a certain specific bid, get some data, and then we'll go from there. I have been definitely utilizing TROAS bidding more than I have in the past and seen that work well. Although every once in a while, it just starts to really, really suck. And I'll go back in and switch to manual CPC, and we will see ROAS jump again. So it's definitely not perfect, but we are switching a little bit more to that. And then honestly, I've started trying max clicks on some of those standard campaigns where, okay, so like let's say in a brand, we're running a campaign where we really want to make sure we own those brand terms. That really is a good match for the max click strategy, because we're just saying, hey, set a really high maximum CPC in there and just go and just get me all of the clicks, because I want to make sure that we own them in this specific campaign. And we'll do that. We'll avoid max clicks in usually in like a top of funnel type campaign. We'll avoid max clicks there, because who knows what's going on. We do need ROAS there, but that's kind of a look into how we look at strategies.
Yeah, great. And Mike, I know you've got thoughts on bidding.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have our own bidding algorithm. But one thing that we always recommend is using eCPC in conjunction with that, because we see EPC as having access to these exclusive signals that Google has, the auction time signals, audience signals, and stuff like that. So it's really valuable data, and you can weave it in. I mean, when I hear, let's say, for example, max clicks, like Kirk was mentioning, I think that's an interesting way to start, if for all the thousands of people out there not using our bidding technology. So that's an interesting way to start, in the sense of, if it's aggressive on market share, let's say, and it's a chance to capture data too. It's kind of a carpet bomb thing to capture data. Yeah, I definitely can recommend eCPC as a, on top of a manual click, it's gonna, EPC these days has pretty uncapped. It can really wildly modify the bid anyhow.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a pretty big step toward automation at that point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We had another question about optimizing in Google Merchant Center. I would say that take some time to dive into Merchant Center, because there may be some new things that you haven't seen, and like the programs that you should be looking at. That's where Surfaces on Google is located. But Kirk, any sort of, I know you use feed rules a lot, things you can, like, 2 quick tips for getting more out of Merchant Center.
Yeah, probably the tips you'll see all across the web are still pretty good, and that is especially focus on optimizing your titles. Definitely, mess around with descriptions as well, but titles, we do put a lot of our optimizing time into those. And that's where sometimes we'll utilize things like feed rules and that, where you can try different techniques of, hey, let's put brand here, let's put product name here, things like that in the feed rules thing. And then I think supplemental feeds, I'm not sure if it's very widely used, but that's a really, really handy way to get in like promotion IDs and things like that, depending on how easy it is for you to do that anyways. But supplemental feeds are great for that, because you can just throw in your item ID and then throw in the promotion ID and how you want, and then keep that updated like within a Google Sheet even. So we'll use those to supplement, especially bulk edit things that kind of change, like promotion IDs.
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to call out, so Google's doing like all kinds of different things in terms of how it's promoting when there's a price drop or sale. And there's also, I called it out in that FAQ, there's this new section towards the bottom of the search results on shopping tab called Shop Sale by Store, I'm pretty sure is what it's called. And so they look like showcase shopping ads, and they're in a carousel. So it'll say the name of the store, it'll highlight 3 products and show their sale price. And so that's another avenue where it's surfacing sale price data. And again, those are organic. So really thinking about using those feeds to be, obviously you want to always keep your feeds updated with your actual prices, but it's just one more way that they are surfacing sale prices. And again, I guess it also points to the increasing price sensitivity perhaps in Google's shopping algorithms. I don't know how much you've seen that. I know Andreas Reifen has talked about price sensitivity being such a big factor in Google Shopping, but I think it'd be interesting to see if it becomes sort of more with these kind of ways that they're getting surfaced. So thank you guys both so much for your time. Before we go, I want to let people know how they can find and connect with you on the socials. So Mike, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, thanks, Ginny. I'm on LinkedIn. I think there's a huge PPC community on Twitter, but I'm just not on Twitter that much. But you can find me, since there's a million Mike Ryans out there, if you just go to the URL and type /in/Mike PPC, and yeah, that'll take you right to my my page.
Great. And Kirk?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm PPC Kirk pretty much everywhere across all the social channels. And then ZATOmarketing.com is our website.
Yeah, Great. So check the chat for those links that I had thrown in earlier. And thanks again so much. Stay tuned. We have the next episode of Live with Search Engine Land coming up at some point next week, TBD. And mark your calendars for our virtual SMX Next. It's going to be June 23rd and 24th. And there's a link in the chat. So Mike and Kirk, thank you all so much. And thanks to everyone for the great questions. Have a great weekend.